We are on our last conversation for the evening. It's about making systemic change across the states, my home state of New York and the state of California. Those states, we are going to hear from Dr. Lester Young from the New York State Board of Regents. Then we'll hear from Chet Hewitt, President and CEO of the Sierra Health Foundation. Then they'll be joined by their colleagues, Dr. Anna Alston, Dr. David Ama, Anthony Rhodes, and our moderator is Jim Shelton. So let's give it up for everybody. For our last panel, please rise in thanking them to come in.
When President Obama talked about how Trayvon could have been him, and he said that Trayvon could have been his son, that spoke to me, as I know it spoke to millions of men across the nation. And the message that it said, quite simply, was, now's the time. Now is the time. And in response, in 2016, in April, after a very aggressive set of strategic steps, New York State enacted My Brother's Keeper into law with an annual allocation of $20 million. Now, our strategy was simply designed to create a movement and not a program across the entire state that really focused on establishing a coherent set of strategies that took people from the cradle to college and career success, ensuring that they achieve the outcomes necessary so that they could be successful regardless of who they were, where they lived, where they came from, or the circumstances they were born into. And in just 2 years, and I'm going to underscore that, in just 2 years, New York State MBK has grown from 5 communities to 23 communities and 7 tribal nations. All across New York State, communities and school districts are implementing an outcome-focused strategy designed to enhance family and community engagement, to address the 6 MBK milestones, to ensure access to high-quality early learning and preschool experiences, expand access to the high school diploma by implementing our multiple pathway strategies, to increase the number of teachers of color with an emphasis on males. And in fact, I would say, and it's important to note, we currently have 16 universities across the state implementing the Teacher Opportunity Corps program that will produce more teachers of color for the students of New York State, to provide leadership opportunities for our young people, and to give our young people youth voice through our MBK Fellows initiatives, and to identify and expand what we are calling exemplary programs for college and career readiness across the state. Now, the early indicators reveal that New York State MBK has exceeded our expectations. I mean, we're on the move. We plan as we go forward to continue to focus on outcomes, to build on our targeted investments, to grow the movement across the state, to figure out what are those policies that we need to implement to disrupt the barriers to our young people's success, and finally, to promote the local alignment of resources in each of our MBK communities so that we can provide continued support for our boys and young men of color. And finally, and I think it's important to note that we began this movement with a series of very simple beliefs. And the first one is that the current reality that our boys and young men find themselves in, just simply stated, it just doesn't have to be that way. See, we believe that there's absolutely nothing wrong with our boys and young men of color. In fact, we know they're absolutely brilliant. And it's up to us, it is up to each one of us to ensure that they have the opportunities that will put them on a path towards success. We have to understand that there is a powerful connection between support, between opportunity, and between development. Support, opportunity, and development. See, we know if we could just get our arms around our young people and give them what they need, they can be successful. And finally, we understand that the issues of culture and development and learning are inextricably connected. Culture, development, and learning. Our young people need to feel good about themselves. They need to know who they are. And we need to provide them with the opportunities that they can be successful. See, we believe that connecting boys and young men of color to a pipeline of opportunity can correct the inequities, can change the prevailing negative narrative, and can ultimately ensure that each and every one of our young people will realize their full potential. Thank you.
When President Obama made the My Brothers Keeper call to action in 2014, there was an enormous response by cities and tribal nations across the United States. Here in California, we were energized by the President's call because it affirmed that existing networks and individuals throughout our state that had been dedicated to important work for many, many years. Communities throughout California, including the 3 impact and 2 seed communities represented here today, share a common belief that a successful future for California requires the vision, the talent, and contributions of all of our youth of color. Not only that, we believe that the change necessary to create the future must be driven by our young people themselves. Our youth are not just recipients of services. They are important actors and agents of change on the policy and advocacy stage. We have committed ourselves to guiding, supporting, and mentoring youth leaders as they stand up for justice, safety, equity, and opportunity. To do so, California's advocates, philanthropic leaders, and policymakers have joined forces through coalitions such as the Alliance for Boys and Men of Color. That's right, give it up. That's our grassroots network of young men fighting and struggling for change. For the California Funders for Boys and Men of Color, an Assembly Select Committee on the status of boys and men of color. We have aligned our funding resources, taken up an ambitious policymaking agenda for the state, and committed to ensuring youth voice and leadership is present and leading in all that we do. Our work together has given us much to be proud of. Over the past 8 years, California has passed more than 100 bills that positively impact youth of color. Examples include banning the box, creating job training programs for the formerly incarcerated, sealing juvenile records, and passing a landmark transparency law focused on police misconduct. And last year, California became the first state in the nation with a fund dedicated to keeping young people out of the juvenile justice system and healing their trauma. While we celebrate each step forward, California's reputation as a progressive leader belies a truth that is far more complicated. A truth that compels us to acknowledge that our youth of color, who make up 70% of our youth population, face barriers at every point in their development. These barriers impact their lives and the social and economic health of our entire state. We must be explicit. Racial inequity is thriving, and many of the systems failing our communities are built upon it. Beginning in the 1980s, California became the country's most extreme example of mass incarceration. And despite being the 5th largest economy in the world, California is home to some of the deepest wealth and health inequities in our nation. Make no mistake, real work has been done, and yet a great need for change still exists. In California, we have chosen to be bold in our leadership and impatient in our pursuit of change. Patience to wait for safety, for health, for access, for opportunity is a privilege our boys and men of color, Black, brown, Native American, and Asian don't have time for, and neither does the great state of California. This new partnership with the Obama Foundation and My Brother's Keeper allows us to team up and be part of and connected to the great work taking place across the country so that we can take the next important steps in realizing a new vision right here in California. To the young people in this room and in the communities back home, know that you are at the center of all that we do. We have extraordinary love for you, and rest assured that we will stand behind you as the next chapter in this historic journey begins, right here, right now. I am my brother's keeper.
Thank you, everyone. As we wait to bring out the couch and set up the panel, just wanted to congratulate our speakers and remind everybody that our session, our plenary sessions and our panel sessions will begin after the end of this conversation. So thank you all so much for your patience and for your attentive listening to these conversations that are so important to the systemic health of MBK. And now we'd like to welcome out the panel. Thank you all so much for coming.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jim Shelton. I want to just pause for a second to acknowledge what we just heard, because throughout the entire time we've heard incredible stories of individuals and programs that are changing lives. But what we heard is how the dream is going to be realized that we actually reach every single young person with the opportunity they deserved. The system, as we have heard, is broken. It is not providing equal opportunity. And the way we change the system is through the kinds of things that we just heard Dr. Young and Chet.
We know each other.
We know each other. Dr. Hewitt lay out for us as the frame for how we change states down to local communities. It is the boring work of the infrastructure and the plumbing, but it is how things get done. So I want to turn first to Dr. Young, and I want to ask you very quickly. You talked about the kinds of strategies that you employed to get the state to begin to take up the work of My Brother's Keeper at that level. Right. But I want you to talk about some of those steps. How did you get the state to be willing to engage on something that is not easy for everybody to swallow?
Okay, there were a series of very strategic steps. The first thing that we had to do is identify who were the champions in the state. And so we had the good fortune that as we took this charge up, that the Speaker of the New York State Assembly Speaker, Assemblyman Carl Hastie, took this up. He understood from the very beginning the importance of doing this as a black man growing up in the South Bronx. The next strategic thing that we had to do on implementing our strategy is ensure that we had the right leadership. Our Commissioner of Education is here, and she put together a team consisting of Dr. Alston, Dr. Donna Pleers, that I know is out there, who leads our Office of Family and Community Engagement. And so we had a team. And then we put together what we called a blue ribbon committee. And the committee consisted of not only experts in this area, but the important stakeholders. So we had members of our state's Black and Latino caucus. We had members of the Superintendent's Association, of the Principals Association, but we also had faith-based communities from around the state. We had community-based organizations represented. So we put together this important group of individuals, and then we took the show on the road. We actually went across the state, listening to youth, listening to communities, and coming up with a set of very strategic recommendations so that from the first month through the 6th month, we had a series of very powerful recommendations that, quite frankly, no one could say no to. And so that's how we started this in the state.
Fantastic. So actually I want to come next then to Anthony Robles. You have been leading the youth voice work in California and the advocacy work. And I want you to talk about how that played a role in creating the conditions for the kinds of things that Chet Hewitt laid out in terms of the policy changes that have happened.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Anthony Robles. I'm with the Youth Justice Coalition. Thank you for having me here. Los Angeles, California. So I just want to start off by saying I appreciated the last panel because they had an open, honest discussion about the true history of the United States. And with us, we also like to explore and understand the history of California and Los Angeles locally, because that's what grounds our work and that's what grounds our narratives and our stories. And it's important for young people to share their stories at the Capitol and just throughout the world, because if not, other people will tell our stories for us. And when other people tell our stories for us, we get policies like Prop 21 in California, which was probably the most draconian criminal justice and juvenile justice policy ever initiated in the country, and that was passed through voters because our narrative was being told for us that all black youth were super predators, or that young Latino men, Mexican men, and indigenous men are drug dealers and rapists. Which is still being told today. And so it's important for us to share our stories and push back against that. That way we can develop the policies in California that we're pushing. And so one of the things that California, the legislature here has done that's really beneficial for us is creating a select committee on the status of boys and men of color, which our issues can be heard. And so we bring youth voices up to there. So, and we also develop the hearings and put the issues in the legislators' ears so then they could hear the issues, and then that develops in a policy. And so one of the big policies, I don't think I'm supposed to talk about this, policies, but we're working on ending willful defiance suspensions and expulsions across California for all students. Thank you.
Fantastic.
And that's coming out of because there was a hearing on it at this the Committee of Status of Boys and Men of Color. So
thanks for that. I really appreciate it. Actually, then I want to come back to you, David, because you are also a youth representative. You're representing the work on the ground that's now starting to happen as the president of My Brother's Keeper in Yonkers. You can take a nod on that. So why don't you tell us, with the work that you're doing on the ground with other youth, what you're most proud of that you guys have gotten done?
Well, my name is David Arma. I'm from Yonkers, New York. I'm 17 years old.
All right.
Yes, sir. Currently attending Saunders Trades and Technical High School. What I'm really proud of about my Yonkers MBK team and the New York State team as well is the community service projects that we've been doing. These community service projects really had a big impact on our community. For example, so we have this toy drive that we did for the autistic children in our school, and the MBK members raised our own money. We donated some money from our own pockets, and we bought toys, gift wrapped them, and then we dressed up as Santa Claus, elves, and all these cool Christmas characters. Then we went to the autistic class and gave them their gifts, and just to see the joy in their face was like, whoa, like, I just love seeing brothers happy, like young kings and queens happy and all that. So like, and and so spark the energy up inside the room over there. What we did was this MBK chant that we do in New York. It's called MBK all day. So I'm gonna try this with y'all. So when I say MBK, I need y'all to say all day, all right? MBK. All day. MBK. All day. MBK. All day. Now that energy inside the room made them really feel like they're part of the My Brothers Keeper Alliance, and they didn't feel like they was different. They really feel like kings and queens, and that's, yeah.
Fantastic. Great job. I think it's been really powerful the way that both in California and in New York, you've been able to go from the policies and legislation at the highest level, if you will, to how it lands on the ground, and using both to change the narrative within your places so that everything gets done better. With that, I actually want to talk for a second, because all this happens because you have partners both within agencies and also within legislatures that understand how to get the mechanisms to work. Now, stay with me for a second. One of the things that's always been a challenge with My Brother's Keeper is it's a broad frame, right? It starts with the early learning and it goes all the way through career. So that means that not only does it apply to boys and men of color, but it also applies to almost anyone.
Right.
So one of the big questions is, when you are looking across an entire state, how do you think about when it is a My Brother's Keeper issue? When is it, in your office, Anel, something that's focused on access and equity? Or when is it something that you let others in other parts of the legislature or the state government take care of?
Sure, that's a great question. And
I'm sorry, say just a little bit about your office and your role.
So I'm the Assistant Commissioner in the New York State Education Department. I lead the Office of Access, Equity, and Community Engagement Services. And so one of the things in my portfolio is the My Brother's Keeper outcomes-based initiative. And so I think it starts with some guiding principles of teamwork and this clarity on working as a team and outside of our silos. And then we look at timing and priority. So for example, when something comes across our desk, like how are we going to meet this challenge, which is students entering school ready to learn? We know in New York State that the governor has a priority of pre-K for all. And so that's working, and we expect that to happen. So then we say, well, how can we best prepare our communities to maximize that opportunity? And so we then are funding partnerships where there is a 0 to 3 initiative, whereby they engage in the basics, which is a research-based prenatal to 3 initiative, where we can fund communities to partner with community agencies and hospitals that will help babies' brain development grow. We know that within the first 3 years of life, 80% of the brain is developed. And so there are things like talk, sing, and point. These are things that you can immerse into the community. We know that we can read and discuss stories. Those are the kind of things that we do and look at. We look at the challenge priorities, we look at the teamwork, and we come up with a team and say, this is going to be the priority.
Fantastic. Now, Chet, I know you made a strategic choice in California about not leaning in from the philanthropic side, specifically in the early learning space. You want to talk about why that was in this particular area?
You know, California is fortunate in some ways that we have a First Five Commission, which has actually put millions, actually tens of $millions into early education and learning in the state of California. And so as we looked at our life course framework, developed by an incredible individual of color, Arnold Chandler, you know, we decided that that was not where we needed to put our initial investments. And that's not to say we're not concerned or interested or supportive of that particular work, but we knew that with limited philanthropic dollars, we wanted to go to the places that were uncovered. And for us, 3 things really stood up. One was criminal and juvenile justice reform. I mean, terminating that prison pipeline. And we were adamant and very focused on that. And some of the great legislation you've seen in California, I think, is targeted in that particular way. The other issue we were focused on is opportunity, and that is getting young men into the labor market, not simply flipping burgers, but at jobs that actually pay living and family-supporting wages. And the last thing that we were really focused on was getting individuals to and through college. Because gaining access to college is one thing, having the supports and help that you need to actually graduate, because that's how you get to a family-supporting wage, was something that we want to focus on as well. And so our philanthropic efforts and our funding resources have been focused on those three issues.
So stay with that for a second, because as a funder, you pulled together a collaboration of other funders. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to work with the others and how you decided on the priorities together?
Yeah, two things. You know, our stories is kind of the inverse of New York's, and not that one is better. They're both great things to do. But I have to say that part of what brought the philanthropic community and the legislature into this really was the work of young people and the voices of young people. We know that in some ways we were a little late to the game. Right? We had an incredible assemblyman from this particular district, Sandre Swanson, who led this particular effort and started the Assembly Select Committee on Boys and Men of Color. And then the philanthropic community kind of fell in line. We have 18 foundations who are part of the California Funders for Boys and Men of Color. We have committed $6 million to our young people, focused heavily on community organizing and empowerment. And as Anthony has said, those rich voices telling real stories in places of power is what really has led to some of the incredible achievements here in California.
Fantastic. So Lester, in your role as a regent, you not only have worked to help to drive this initiative across the state, but you sit on top of one of the largest and in some ways both the best and the worst of the education systems in the country. So as you think about how these things integrate, how do you think about leveraging your role with the education system against the work that you're doing with MBK?
Well, that very interesting question. We are the education entity in the state, and so as such, you know, it's important that we have to stay in our lane. However, we also know that one of the characteristics of many of our young people that haven't been successful is that they haven't had a successful school experience. And so what we have to do is figure out, okay, what are those policies that are in place that are barriers to that, and then how do we re-examine those policies and make appropriate changes? So, for example, we've talked these last couple of days about violence, and one of the things that we had a history of doing in New York State is, you know, we were very good at analyzing violence data, right? We could collect the data, we could analyze the data, and every year we could report out what schools have the largest percentage of incidents. Well, we understand that just focusing on numbers and incidents doesn't change the culture and climate of the school. And so what we said is that we're going to change that. And so in addition to looking at the numbers, we also wanted to look at, well, what is actually going on in the community? What is actually going on in the school? What are the relationships between students and staff? What are the relationships between the school and the community? Because we understand that there are lots of schools and communities where you don't have those episodes. And so what do we have to do to change? So we try to use the position of regent to really correct some of the policies that have resulted in many of the inequities that we're talking about.
Fantastic. Anthony, one of the things you mentioned before we came on was the role that you all play, not only in bringing voice to it, but actually shaping the agenda of the commissions. Can you talk about that for a second? And you said something about using the data.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So one of the things that we do is obviously influence the agenda of the hearings and using the data, because data is a powerful weapon, and data can be used against us, or it could be used for us. And so one of the things we do is community, what we call real search instead of research, because a lot of research that's done in academia, it doesn't get out to the community. And so we do our own research and gather our own data. Obviously, we work in partnerships with other organizations, but we want to make sure that the community is doing the research and knows about the research, and that way we can influence and enact policy change that will actually be effective and actually change our lives, and not just something that doesn't affect us. But yeah, so I don't know if that answered your question.
It did answer the question. I mean, because we're going to, as we come to a close, I think we've heard 3 or 4 things that are really, I think, important for everybody to hear. One is that the agenda starts it begins and ends with the voices of youth in terms of setting the agenda about what's actually going to be important and then using those voices to actually make the change. The second is this partnership that we see between philanthropy and the community and the legislature to actually enact things that can go across systemically. And the third thing is that it all doesn't matter unless it lands on the ground the way David talked about in terms of the kind of things that he and his partners are doing in the field to actually change lives. That blueprint, I think, can actually serve us in many, many communities and states across the country. And I want to thank you, brothers, for bringing that story to us today. With that, would you thank our panel?